Hey guys, welcome to today's webcast. I'm just gonna check in here, making sure everything's working. So for those of you that are live on the call, if you can let me know if you can hear me okay, and then we're gonna jump in momentarily. I'm getting some thumbs up, so hopefully you guys can hear me pretty good. I just got my screen here so I can watch the comments come in a little bit easier. All right. So excited to share this topic with you guys. It's something that I see in my case studies with my clients, in my life, in myself all the time. And I think it's extremely important for us to talk about this because it's this pandemic that is affecting us on a global scale. And I think the most dangerous thing that we could do to ourselves is the fact that we're treating anxiety like it's an okay thing. Everyone feels anxious. It's just a part of our everyday reality. I should just suck it up and princess, just like everyone else. And the reason I share this with you is because for those of you who might not know, for years I worked on the stock market. I lived in a very high pressure, high pace. We worked with like big sums of money, and anxiety was part of your resume. It was part of your job description. And having lived in that environment where anxiety is something that we just accept as the norm was probably the biggest disfavor that I ever did to myself, was thinking that if I wasn't anxious, if I wasn't a little bit stressed out, if I didn't feel a little bit under the gun, then maybe I wasn't working hard enough. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I needed to like step up my game so that I would be in league with my peers. In the environment that I lived with, the motto was work hard, play hard, and pretty much most people would burn out around 50 or 45 years old. So there was always like a succession for early retirement. So I really wanted to dive in today, and I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to understand anxiety the way that I've worked at understanding it. So the first thing I want to do is give you some clarity about what anxiety is, because it's a word that we are almost overusing now. So I wanted to kind of distinguish a few different things, although they do kind of sometimes play well together. I wanted to separate them so then you can start to create awareness for yourself. And if I've learned anything over these years of helping people transform their lives into the one of their desires, is that if you can gain awareness of what the problem is, then you can do something about it. And honestly, about 90% of the work comes from being aware of what the friggin' problem is. So as soon as you know what's going on, then you can start to actually do something about it. So how does that sound to you guys? So I'll get you, even before we dive in, I want to get a feel. So whether you're listening to the replay or whether you're joining me live today, I'd really love a show of hands or a yes or no. How many of you are experiencing anxiety? And I really want to know, because I want to get a feel for how long do you experience anxiety for? Do you have anxiety for like 5 minutes? Do you have anxiety for an hour? Do you wake up every day with anxiety? And if so, how long have you had anxiety? Do you have anxiety for a week, for a month, for years? I want to get a feel for what is the new norm for our society and what people are experiencing. So if you'd be so kind to go ahead and pop in the comments and let me know how much anxiety are you having? How long are you experiencing it? Because I really want to create some solutions that are in alignment with what people are actually having as their own personal experience. I'm going to share with you some quick tips so that you can actually have some solutions that you can walk away with today. So go ahead and pop those in the comments. That would be awesome. You can even hashtag replay if that's what you're doing. So while you go ahead and take a minute to pop those in the comments, I'm going to start by offering you some clarity on what anxiety is. So the first thing that we talk a lot about, and one of the topics that, or one of the words that we almost overuse just as much as anxiety, is the word stress. So stress is essentially you have too much of something or not enough of something. And with stress, you can have emotional stress, mental stress, physical stress, and you can even have different levels of spiritual stress, if you will. So stress is actually just an experience that you're having that is stressing your emotions. So you have maybe not enough love or too much drama. You might have not enough sugar or too much sugar, not enough water or too much of something. So you can have that physical stress that's created through a lack of nutrient or an overabundance of something. And then you can also have mental stress. And mental stress is very detrimental because what's happening in your mindset affects your emotional state and your physical state. So that's why I really like to focus on mindset and mindset therapy, because if you can change it in your mindset, you can change it at the source of what triggers your emotion and what is helping your body to heal and balance itself, well, then you can really go a long way to resolving the other types of stress that you might be experiencing. So stress is too much of something or not enough of something. So if you go out and you have a little bit too much to drink, you create stress on your body. That's a physical stress. If you're going through a difficult time in your relationship with your partner, well, that's an emotional and sometimes a mental type of stress. And sometimes you'll have so much stress that it'll actually create a physical experience for you. Now, the other word and the other thing I wanted to really expand on a little bit is what overwhelm is. So overwhelm, it's like stress, except overwhelm is specifically too much of something. So you have too much on your plate, you have an abundance of emotions that you're not managing or releasing, that you're just kind of hoarding. Overwhelm is often is often related, if you will, to emotional or mental, physical clutter. So overwhelm can be created by just having too much of something. So when I do work with my clients, we look a lot at what priorities are and what core values are when it comes to overwhelm. So that brings me to the next thing, fear. Okay, so show of hands, who's had some fear in their life? Yeah. Okay. So fear is a natural part of life. However, where fear becomes an issue is when we start to make fear-based choices, because then we're making choices based on our fear of what will happen if we don't make certain choices. So then we find ourselves pushed in different situations or pushed into making certain choices without recognizing that we have other choices available to us. But because fear is such a strong drive, when we make fear-based choices, we often keep repeating the same cycle over and over and over again because we're too afraid of what might happen if we don't stay in our comfort zones. So fear is, and I know you've all experienced fear. You can have mental fear, you can have emotional fear, and you can have physical fear. If you've ever gone to like a thriller movie or you had something really big happen to you in your life, you have experienced what fear is on a physical level. You can cold sweats or really feeling that fear on the body level. So that brings me now down to anxiety, because anxiety is essentially an overwhelm of fear. So anxiety is very specific as to where anxiety comes from. Anxiety is fear driven. You become anxious because you're fearful of what will happen, and your fear becomes so big and you become so overwhelmed with it, then you have anxiety. So if you're experiencing anxiety, and you're recognizing it and you're interpreting it properly, you are 100% definitely in overwhelm of fear. So hopefully just that little tidbit will help you to recognize, okay, well, what am I now fearful of? So by understanding the difference of what these different things are, am I stressed out? Am I overwhelmed? Am I in fear? Have I gotten into full-blown anxiety? It will help you to understand what you're dealing with, so then you can deal with it in an appropriate way. And I'm just hearing from the comments here from Wendy. I often feel like fear rules my life and the fallout just dominates from that. And that's exactly what happens when you're making fear-based choices. That becomes your new normal, and then you get stuck in this vicious toxic cycle. And I work with people all the time to break that. So it's about creating some safe experiences for you so that you can give yourself permission to make different choices that are not fear-based while keeping you safe. And I'll talk about the different types of priorities that your subconscious has, and why fear always trumps joy, at least as it pertains to the subconscious. So here are some super common anxiety-related fears and where it derives from. So the fear comes from recognizing that you can't do everything on your list, right? Your to-do list, the one that you give to yourself that's already unrealistic to start off with. Then you go to bed with it every night. Then you wake up with it the next day. And then you have yesterday's to-do list that you didn't finish. And then today's to-do list that is like already on top of that. And then you go to bed and you wake up every day of your life, just keep adding to that list over and over and over again without taking the time to purge and prioritize that list. That's a super common factor when it comes to anxiety, one that I work with a lot. Fear of not being able to pay your bills, financial fear and fear of financial failure is a huge common denominator when it comes to anxiety. So as an ex-financial analyst and someone who used to work in financial services for over 15 years, I have that background. So I completely understand the fear that comes with addressing financial realities and recognizing that if you can't find a safe place to get real about your finances, well, then you also can't do anything about it. And when I work with people, I actually take a whole different approach and viewpoint to the budget. It's about where we're going to give you money to spend instead of where we're going to restrict you. So I use a budget in the completely opposite way, giving you benefits instead of taking away different things. So there's the common fear around anxiety is around being able to pay your bills, being able to meet all of your obligations and your financial obligations. Another common fear that I see with people when I work with them is that they can't get all of their needs met. So I'm not able to get this met, receive. So it's more about receivership and being able to receive everything that you need and being able to have all of your needs met. And that can really easily overlap into the financial, because in the world that we live in, we trade things for money, right? So sometimes it's also can be a fear of, am I going to be able to be invited to that party? Am I going to be able to rely on my friends to support me when I need to? So are your fears being met? Another common fear that is associated strongly with anxiety is I can't meet all of my obligations and responsibilities. So I want you to think outside of the financial realm. So your obligations, as in maybe your obligations to your boss, to yourself, to your loved ones, to your obligations to keeping your house clean, to doing your laundry, to doing your dishes. All of those obligations that we create different levels of priorities for, and other obligations that we oblige ourselves that are not necessarily in our highest and best good. So do you want to keep your friend happy, or do you want to be fully and completely having a panic attack, right? Sometimes we create these obligations on ourselves and we never reevaluate to see if they're really in alignment with how we want to live our lives. And then there's our responsibilities, right? So for those of you who may have children or other responsibilities, you have responsibilities to your children, you have responsibilities to your employer, you have responsibilities to your spouses, you have responsibilities to your community. And being sure to really allocate and prioritize those in a way that are satisfying to yourself is really, really important. So often what I see when I work with people is their perception of what their obligations and responsibilities are completely unrealistic. Like there's just no way that one human being could meet all of these expectations. So it's simply about remodeling or creating a new template for what the reality of what an obligation and what a responsibility can look like. And often, when we grow up, and we're always very careful to not use this type of language with our daughter. And I noticed that our daycares and our schools are really keep catching up to this. But I know when I was young, when I did something that my parents approved of, they would say, "Good girl." And so about meeting other people's obligations and responsibilities, often on a subconscious level and often in our subconscious programming, is really associated with being accepted, being loved, and being good people. And most of us generally want to be recognized. We want to be good people. We want to be connected to other people that we love and that we care for. So that can create a really big burden when we start to quantify what we can do for other people as a relational quantifier of what our value is. Because then if you get sick for a week and you can't do anything for anybody, well, then subconsciously your value starts to depreciate. And we don't want that, right? We want you to be able to take time for yourself when you need it without feeling like not a good person. And I see this show up for my clients all the time. Another very common fear that's associated with anxiety is our perception that we can't meet other people's expectation. And this one's really funny because a lot of the time, this is what's actually happening. And when we start to map out the neurology and the programs that's associated with this particular type of fear, is what we think other people expect from us and what people actually expect from us are often 99.999% of the time not even the same thing. We think that they want us to do this, and the people that really love us just want us to be happy and they want us to do what we want. And then there's always room for that collaboration and that shared experience. So our fear of not being able to meet others' expectations is really seated in our basic need to feel accepted, to feel valued, to feel wanted, to feel loved, and to have that basic need of love and belonging met. So when we have fears around being able to meet other people's expectations, it can create anxiety. Now, I want you to remember too, I'm going to keep going through the list, but you might have a little bit of this fear and a little bit of that fear and a little bit of this fear, and it becomes kind of a goulash or a casserole of different types of fear. So then when you have anxiety, you might not be able to put your finger on it. And a lot of the times it's just a whole bunch of different fear that's been accumulating and layering on top of itself. And then when you're like completely having a panic attack, you don't even know why. You don't even know what you're afraid of anymore. And it's simply because it's just been accumulating and cultivating, and then kind of like those leftovers that you put in the back of your fridge that you keep pushing back there. And then by the time you get to it, you notice there's a smell you don't even know, or you can't even recognize what that was anymore. So think that in those terms in regards to hoarding fears and accumulating fears in your emotional, mental, and physical body. One of the most super common fears that show up, and I live this all the time, I'm always, getting myself back in alignment, is you don't have enough time, right? Show me a show of hands. Who here, one of their biggest stressors is the perception that they don't have enough time, that they don't have enough money, that they don't have enough support, or that they don't have enough resources to achieve their goals. That is one of the most common denominators that I see with people that are struggling and suffering from anxiety. So it's about changing the perspective and changing the priority. So then that way you have enough time. We all actually have the same exact amount of time. There are 24 hours in the day, 7 days in the week for everybody who lives on the planet. So your perception of not having enough time, it's more about you making choices with your time that are maybe not in alignment with what your actual priorities are. And one of the other really, really big ones that's associated with anxiety is our fear of rejection, our fear of judgment, our fear of criticism, and ultimately our fear of dying, our fear of death. So, oh my God, I have to do this or else it'll be the end of the world. And just because we're not in high school anymore, we still have those, oh my God, it's going to be the end of the world if I don't do A, B, or C by this amount of time. And depending on what kind of thing that you're looking at, especially if you work in the ER, or if you're a medical doctor, or if you're a fireman, or you work in that safety level, well, chances are then maybe if you don't get A or B done within a certain amount of time, yes, somebody could die. But for the most part, getting that report to your boss by 5 o'clock, Nobody's usually going to die. They might not like that you don't have it done right away or in the way that they wanted. But we tend to like over blow up what we think the outcome's going to be. Yes, of course, everyone likes to get their work in on time and to have things created. But the thing that you need to ask yourself is what you're being given, is it reasonable for what you can get done in the day? And if you need further time or further support, are you asking for it? So sometimes it's not about not having the resources, but a lot of times it's about not acknowledging or being okay with asking for the help that you need. And Rochelle shares, I'm aware that I create feelings of urgency, thinking that I don't have enough time. And that's what we do, is we create this we have a perspective that it's like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And whether or not it's the end of the world doesn't actually matter. If you think it's going to be the end of the world, or a part of you thinks it's going to be the end of the world, or a part of you perceives that it's going to be the end of the world, in your reality bubble, it's the end of the world. What you think is the most important thing. So if you believe that, then you can create that sense of urging yourself, and you panic yourself, and you create this vicious cycle within yourself, where then you're living in constant fear, and then you're creating that. So the thing that you need to know about anxiety is it's not just about this mental stress, but you're creating emotional stress, and you're also creating stress on all of your bodily functions, because your body goes into fight or flight mode. And when it's in fight or flight mode, it's not focusing on healing your body. It's not focusing on purging your toxins. It's not focusing on being balanced and doing all of the things that it needs to do to have a nice, healthy, optimal health. It affects and it breaks down your immune system. It really makes you emotionally raw. So there's so many side effects to anxiety, and I'm going to give you a list of ones, because maybe you're experiencing them and you don't even realize that you are. One of the biggest core things that I see a lot when it comes to when I map out the neurology of where the anxiety is coming from is a lot of it's really seated in fears around security. So anxiety is really, really connected, either directly or indirectly, around your perception or fear of being safe. So anxiety is basically just about your perception of how safe you are in your situation. And unless you're in a burning house, chances are the level of anxiety and fear that you're experiencing and the reality of the relative safety that you're living in don't match up, right? So if you can recognize that and go, okay, I'm way more stressed out for what's reasonable, or even how you want to live your life. And that's where the power of choice and the power of priority really can support you in realigning what you see or recognize as important and unimportant, because the subconscious needs a little bit of direction sometimes. All of our subconscious programs are created mostly between the age of 0 and 7. And if I were to ask you right now, if you would let your 7-year-old decide what was important to you on your desk, you would probably say no. But all of these programs that you're using to get around in life, a lot of them you created while you were in that young stage. Chances are that you are using the same patterns that you learned from your parents or from the people around you. And when you look at how your parents or the people around you dealt with stressful situations or fear, were they healthy? Right? And so are you perpetuating or reflecting back those old patterns because that's all you knew? That's basically what you grew up with. And so we tend to recreate those patterns, not because we want to, but because it's what our subconscious knows and is comfortable with. So it's about creating new patterns and new programs that are more in support with the goals and desires that you have for yourself. Does that sound a little bit touching home for some people? When you look at how your mom or your dad deals with difficult situations, do you have, and most people will be similar, and every once in a while somebody will actually use the complete opposite. So their parent will be like, for example, a total control freak, and then this person's problem is that they cannot schedule anything for them. So they've kind of like gone completely the other way. So let me talk to you about some common anxiety symptoms. So that way you may not even realize or recognize that you have anxiety. So here are some of the things that you should be aware of that are super common symptoms of people who have anxiety. So the first one that we usually brush off is brain fog. Brain fog and disorientation, or lack of focus or lack of knowing what to do next, is often a super common symptom of anxiety, because then you can't even think about what you want to do. You're so overwhelmed with the thoughts of fear. And I want to be clear, the thoughts of fear are not necessarily conscious. They're unconscious or subconscious. So you have the feeling of anxiety, but you might not actually realize or know what you're actually afraid of. So when you have that disconnect, I want you to know that it's not just in your head and you're like, well, I'm trying to figure out what I'm afraid of, but I don't really know. The truth is because you probably aren't even consciously aware of it, because on a rational level, that fear doesn't make sense. But our emotions are actually driven by our subconscious perspectives, not our conscious perspectives. So if your feelings don't match your thoughts, your conscious thoughts, and then you'll create that feeling for yourself and you'll create some of these symptoms. So you'll feel one of the other really common symptom is overwhelm. One of the other common symptoms is stress, right? So overwhelm, stress, and fear-based thinking are symptoms of anxiety, if you will, and also precursors to anxiety. So they create it, and they're also symptoms of it. So that's where it gets a little confusing for some people. You actually might feel very skittish, kind of like a squirrel. You're on edge. You are startled easily. You might be very a little bit of a short fuse. Not that you necessarily get angry, but as soon as something doesn't go to plan, you're like, oh my God, that's it. Like you just feel completely overwhelmed by the fact that things didn't go to plan, because now you have to like reorganize and rethink. So it really triggers you. A lot of people who suffer from anxiety often will tell me, Anik, I feel so stretched thin. And that's because they're trying to juggle all of these balls there's just too many balls in the air that you need to decide what balls you want to put down and what balls you actually want to juggle. Something that's really common as well that people just kind of almost like very slowly get used to is difficulty breathing. Like they won't be able to take a deep breath, or they live life taking very shallow breaths all the time. And that's actually a precursor to having a panic attack, and also a very telltale sign of being in the fight or flight physical response. So take a breath. Breathe. Right? Another common symptom is a pressure in the chest. People will actually feel this pressure. Some people will actually feel like they're having a heart attack, and they get to the hospital and they're like, you're not having a heart attack. You're just stressed out. It's all in your head. And I mean, there's nothing worse to tell somebody who's having anxiety that it's all in your head. There's nothing wrong with you. Yes, there's something wrong with you. You're suffering from anxiety. You have anxiety, you have an overwhelm of fear, and something it's not just, oh, just relax, go on vacation. That's not going to change the programming or the what you're creating in your life. And a lot of people will be like, oh, I can't wait to get on vacation. They go on vacation for 2 weeks. They blow like $5,000 going to Mexico. They feel great for 2 weeks. And then they start getting stressed out as soon as they start packing to come back to their home and their reality. And then they're basically living for the next weekend. And I actually speak from personal experience, because I used to live for the weekend and I used to live for my vacations. And in the meantime, it was accumulated stress and anxiety, peak right before I would go on vacation, and then enjoy some vacation time with always still some of that stuff kind of playing in the background. And then I actually start to get stressed out before even going back to work. I hope nothing, nothing blew up while I was gone. I hope I didn't forget anything. And, so constantly having that fear. Some people will actually go as far as having heart palpitations. A really common one that we brush off is headaches, stress headaches, and migraines. You'll also have experiences of frustration, anger, resentment, and bitterness. Those are super common when I look at anxiety with people. And it can actually go and create physical pain, where you have actual chronic pain in your body that's being created by your anxiety. So for fun, how many of you have had some of these symptoms? And I'd love if you actually posted what your symptoms are, so I can do a little bit of a survey to see just how common these are. Because I know I see them in my practice all the time, but I've never taken the time to actually quantify how many people or what percentage of people have these symptoms. Something that's also very common is negative self-talk. And something that shows up a lot too, that we would never really relate to anxiety, but I've made the link, I just see it all the time, is jumping to conclusions, right? So something happens and then they're already in the future fear of what that means. So they jump to conclusions. Oh, well, you're not going to help me out then. Or here's the problem. The jumping to conclusion is actually a symptom of anxiety for the most part. You can jump to conclusions without being anxious, but when you jump to conclusions, you've already decided that there's going to be a bad outcome, right? So that's future fear. So in a nutshell, anxiety is too much fear of what's going to happen in the future. So it's future fear overwhelm, if that simplifies it for you. So anxiety is an accumulation of your fear of what's going to happen to you in the future. I'm hearing some people say, I have all of them. Okay, well, let's start giving you some tools, or at least some awareness. And for those of you who don't know, I usually just do programs, but for the summer, I've opened up my calendar for some one-on-one sessions. So if you need a little bit of relief, I am here to work with you directly as an ad hoc session. Constant planning. So if you're constantly trying to figure stuff out and constantly scheduling and planning and organizing, that excessiveness is your preemptive attack to satisfying your anxiety. When you have anxiety too, you can't fully relax. People who are also riddled with anxiety will and can be, I'm not going to call you a control freak because I know that will trigger some of you, but you could be overly controlling. You're trying to control all of the situations, because trying to stay in control of the situations helps you to feel safe. And anxiety is fear. So often what we try to do is we try to find a way to feel safe in the situation. So over controlling is one of the coping mechanisms that many people use to deal with fear. Another one that people use, and I don't expect you to put your hand up, but if you're feeling really courageous today, you can, is manipulation and lying. People that experience or experiencing anxiety will manipulate and lie, because they'll try to get somebody to help them, not recognizing that they could just simply ask them, or they'll lie about what they're doing because they can't say no, or they feel like they can't say no, or they feel guilty for saying no, and then they feel guilty for lying, right? One of the most common denominators, and I have to say this is 100%, is people who are struggling with anxiety constantly are making fear-based choices. They make choices based on their fears all the time. And because they make fear-based choices, then they're like, well, I always get the same result, so why bother? And well, the truth is that when you make fear-based choices, you just keep recreating the same pattern. Einstein said, you can't keep doing the same thing and then expect a different result. Well, that's very true. If you keep making the same choices, then you will always get the same outcome. And if you don't like the outcome, you don't like what you see in your life, it's time for you to have a sit down and chat with yourself about, okay, what do I need to do to feel safe in the situation so I can make choices that are based on my desires instead of choices that are based on my fear. And most commonly, another one for the anxiety box is distrust. People who suffer from anxiety are riddled with fear, and they have a really hard time trusting themselves, trusting the universe, trusting their boss, trusting their friends, their colleagues, their resources. They're in a constant state of distrust for the most part. So I wanted to chat with you about the hierarchy of needs, because our subconscious has a certain qualification, if you will, of what's super, super important and what's not so important. And there's a certain priority level that it has, and how it decides what's more important, what's less important. So the most important thing for your subconscious mind is your physical needs. So breathing, food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep. That's your deep security fears, right? So you surviving and having what you need to survive is the utmost importance for your subconscious. And if it feels that those things are threatened, it will sabotage you to make sure that those fears are being satisfied. Now, it'll be very clear, your physical needs might not actually be or reasonably be challenged, but if your subconscious perceives them to be based on your programming, then it will be like, I don't care if you want to be happy, I want to be safe. Safety trumps joy in the subconscious world. So Natasha shares, before this, I would have to say that I had 1/10 anxiety. And after hearing this, I'm a 10. And that's what most people don't realize, is they're comparing themselves, or they don't realize just how widespread their anxiety is until we actually lay out all of the symptoms and all of the factors that come into it. And that's why I felt it was really important to share this with you today, was because we're often just unaware of how deeply this anxiety controls our lives. Essentially, you're being controlled by your anxiety. So there's essentially only one thing that you can do, or one thing that I would suggest that you do, is that you get in control of it by whatever means that speaks to you. That's what you should do. I'm going to give you one of my favorite quick tips before we go today, and I'm also going to give you a couple of healing downloads to help you feel safe, because it's all about safety. So some of the other safety and security topics that are extremely important for your subconscious is safety and security when it pertains to your health, your employment, your property, your family, and your social stability. So those are things that will always trump your personal joy. Because we live in a community, and it's important for us to be accepted by our community, because our community supports our well-being, right? If Sobeys or if your grocery store didn't want to sell food to you anymore, unless you have a homestead, you'd be kind of screwed. If your employer didn't want to hire you anymore, and nobody else wanted to hire you, then, unless you had an entrepreneurship mindset, you would be screwed. And even if you were an entrepreneur, nobody wanted to hire you, well, then you'd be screwed. So we need our community, whether we like it or not. We need people into our lives, so that we can have that safety and security that comes with the collaboration that comes with living in a community. So being accepted, you might not consciously believe that you care what other people think, or you care what, that you really pay attention to these judgments. And that might be true very well on the conscious level, but your subconscious may care, especially if you're self-sabotaging yourself when it comes to those relationships. Now, one way that I really like to help people recognize where their subconscious patterns are is I call it my reality check. So is what you think consciously, you're like, no, I don't care what people think. But then you're constantly faced with judgment and criticism, or you are constantly judging and criticizing people. So your conscious belief and your actual physical reality, they don't match up, which means your subconscious pattern is the one that's feeding these judgments, these fear of criticisms, this gossiping, this comparison, and all that comes with it. So I always kind of suggest, it's like, If you're really convinced that you don't have a problem with money, yet your bank account's always tap dry and you have huge amounts of debt, well, then you need to really ask yourself, okay, well, I consciously don't have a problem with money, yet I have a physical reality check problem with money. So the common denominator here is you have a problem with money. You don't think you do, but you do. So your subconscious is the one that's creating these subconscious, making these subconscious choices and attracting this experience to yourself. I'll give you a little bit of a quick tip on how the subconscious and the conscious work. So your conscious mind is only 5% of your vibration and your actual choices that you're making throughout the day. Your subconscious patterning is what's making all the big moves in the background, right? So if you drove today, if I asked you, do you remember your drive? Like if you were going somewhere as you've gone more than 2 or 3 times, well, then chances are you don't remember where you turned or putting your blinker on or hitting the brake. And especially if you've been driving for a long time, when you compare it to the first time you drove to when you drove today, like it was like easy peasy lemon squeezy. But when you learn something the first time, you're doing it with your conscious mind. So once you know how to deal with the situation, your subconscious is constantly taking over. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I've lived subconsciously and realized to myself, somebody's like, you know, like you say hi and how's it going? But they're like, hey, and I'm like, oh, good, you, thanks. And they didn't even ask me how I was, right? So you have these automatic programs that you just kind of do. And often we'll catch ourselves when somebody will ask us for something and we'll be like, oh, yes, sure. And they were like, oh, why did I say yes to that? And it's because you have a subconscious program to say yes. So that's just a little quick, I've got a number of different webcasts specifically on the subconscious, but I wanted to give you some clarity as to just how much power your subconscious has. And that part of yourself is the one that's really the big player in creating your reality. So here are some quantum healing downloads that I want to offer you and offer your subconscious so that you can start to chip away and start to resolve and overcome this anxiety issue. So I'm going to get you guys to give me a yes or a sure if you're interested in these downloads. So I'll give you guys a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it is, what it feels like, and how to feel safe while moving this process of discovering and addressing your fear, because anxiety is just fear. So if you want that download, say yes. And something that's also very, very supportive is when you're in anxiety, you're living in the fear in the future, which means you're not in the present moment. So I'm going to download, do you want to know what it is, what it feels like, and how to live in the present moment and release yourself from your future fears. So I'm getting some yeses here. So that sounds good. So with your permission, and you can say yes out loud, that's a little bit more supportive. Would you like to know what it is, what it feels like, and how to live your life while feeling safe, while moving through this process of discovery and addressing of your fears? Knowing that you're safe, that you're supported, and that you have the resources that you need, and that you can reach out and access those resources if you choose. Would that be okay? Would you like to know what it is and what it feels like to be fully and completely in the present moment without allowing your fear to redirect you into the future? So you can go ahead and say yes if you would like that one too. Okay, so here's a little bit of homework that I want to give you guys, and I'm going to just go ahead and put this in the comments so that you can see it right now. See if it works. It's going to let me or not. For some reason it's not. Let's see. Let me see if I have to type it. So ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What's the worst thing that could happen? What could happen right now if I just stopped and took a break or relaxed? What would happen right now if I said no? That's what I'm hearing. So ask yourself, and I want you to really release any judgments or criticisms of what's going to jump into your head. Because, like I said, it's not rational, it's not your conscious mind, it's your subconscious mind. So when you look at something that you're afraid of, so what are you afraid of? Right? Maybe it's from that list that I gave you earlier. Are you afraid of not paying your bills? Are you afraid of not having enough? Are you afraid of not meeting your responsibilities and your obligations? Are you afraid of letting other people down? Are you afraid of disappointment? Are you afraid of rejection? Are you afraid of dying? What is your fear? And this is the funny thing about fear is fear only has power over you when you ignore it. As soon as you acknowledge, you know what, I'm afraid of this, you start to dissolve the power that unspoken fear has over you. As soon as you do this with your fear and go, I'm afraid of this, it doesn't blow it up. It actually starts to dissolve it, because then you're facing it. So in recognizing and asking what your fear is extremely important to support you in dissolving those fears. And so one of the anxiety clearing processes that I like to use with my clients that I work with is the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to outline their fears. And we tend to do that by category. So what are you afraid of financially? What are you afraid of in your physical environment? Like, what are you afraid of in your career? And we don't go like super, we don't stir up a lot of shit. We just kind of like, generally speaking, what are what if you were to guess, what were you afraid of? And then we dig down to the deepest fear, because fear of not paying your bills, and then you have that fear all the time, it's not usually the deepest fear. There's usually another fear that's a little bit deeper than that. And then getting real on realistic expectations is, are you over expecting from yourself? And if you are, well, then chances are you're creating this huge to-do list that you can never achieve. So of course you're going to have fear of not being able to achieve that, because it's not a reasonable expectation on yourself, even to start off with. So I always look at, are your expectations that you're setting on yourself or on other people, are they realistic to start off with? Are you setting yourself up to fail? Are you setting yourself up for disappointment? And it's not that you can't expect yourself some things from yourself and things from other people. Is it reasonable? Is it realistic? Then the other thing that I like to do is to clarify your priorities and your responsibilities, right? What's more important to you? Having like a crystal clean, perfect house, or being stressed out? Like, so pick one. Sometimes you need to pick one, or sometimes it's like, or maybe it's just, even though you want to do it yourself, but you're completely overwhelmed, maybe it's in your best interest to hire somebody to come and do the bigger stuff once a week or twice a month. And something that people really find a lot of support with is then we do a purge and we reprioritize. We recognize and we identify what's really important for you in your life. And I'll have to be honest with you, it always breaks down to almost 5 things. And the most common ones I see is, I want to be happy, I want to feel free, I want to be loved, I want to have safety, and I want to have passion in my life, or satisfaction. At the end of the day, you only pretty much want 5 things. You want these 5 things that then have a whole bunch of different other feelings that are associated with them, and then your experiences that are associated with them. So if you make a list of the 5 things that are extremely important to you in your life for you to experience on a regular basis, are you making choices that are saying yes to those experiences? If you saying yes to this thing, does it bring you joy? Does it bring you peace? Does it bring you safety? Does it bring you passion? Does it help you feel satisfied? And if it's not saying yes to those 5 things that are important for you personally, then you need to ask yourself the question of, why am I saying yes to this? And then you need to ask your other question, what would be the worst thing that would happen if I didn't say yes to this? And there will be times as you transition between what your life looks like now and what you want your life to look like, where, maybe I'm on a little bit of lag here. So there will be a transition between where you are now to where you want to be. And then you're going to maybe say yes temporarily to some of these things that don't quite match this quality image that you have for your future life. But that's with the knowingness that I'm saying yes, but only for now until I have a better opportunity. But if you say yes with a condition that this is a temporary yes, then you're essentially inviting the universe and everything around you to show you a different option. And you're staying open to a possibility and just saying, yes, this is what I'm accepting for myself. I guess that's all I have access to. But if you said, I'm just going to say yes for now, and I'm going to invite other opportunities, then energetically you become a beacon and a magnet for those other opportunities to come into your awareness. Because most of the time when I work with people is they have opportunities right here, but they can't see past their fear. They're like, oh, no, I got to do this. I've always said yes to this. And if I don't say yes to this, well, I don't know what's going to happen because I've always just said yes to this. So I have to live this way. And as soon as we kind of open up those blinders a little bit, then they're like, oh, well, I can also do this and I can also do this. And I remember this, but I didn't kind of forgot about it and put it aside. So your perspective of what's available to you becomes broader, and the opportunities that are available to you, you become aware of them. Whereas before you might not have been. And so one of the things that I want to share with you guys, so it's essentially figure out what you're afraid of, dive deep into what that deepest fear is, get clarity on what is reasonable for you to expect for yourself, get clear on what your priorities are, get clear on what your responsibilities are, cut the fat on that stuff, purge and reprioritize your life so that it fits the image of what you want your life to look like, and take ownership and be the author of your own reality. And then ask a simple question is like, how does anxiety motivate and drive you? Because like it or not, anxiety is driving you in some way. For most people, it's keeping them motivated. So as long as I'm like stressed out, I'll push through my fear. Well, that's a hell of a way of pushing through your fear. Personally, I prefer to release the fear and disempower the fear, and then you move forward. Instead of ripping through your fear, which I know a lot of people are super like, yeah, just do it, just push through it. And sometimes you'll have those opportunities where you move into action with still a little bit of uncertainty. But there's a huge difference between ripping through your fear and moving into an unknown, uncertain environment. And so there's a happy in between there where it's not always about ripping off the Band-Aid. It can also be about releasing the fear first and then moving into that new space so that it's less uncomfortable. And then it's about choosing the new vibration and choosing to stay on top of it and keeping yourself accountable to what's important to you. What's more important, pleasing everyone else or being happy? Because you know what, at the end of the day, you're the only one that can make that choice for yourself. And I'll be completely honest, the people that love you in your life, the people that really love you in your life, they just want you to be happy. That's all they want. And if they don't want you to be happy, well, then they're probably not the people that love you in your life. Like, I hate to be the person to say that, but if the people that love you want you to be happy, that is what they want for you. So, you know, like, that's the choices that you have to make. Is only you can make those choices for yourself. So it's really time to step up. And one of the reasons why it's really important for us to talk about this summer, because I know a lot of you guys are on break, but I want you to realize that right now we have double eclipses, we have new moons, we have a whole bunch of planets in retrograde. Like, whether you like it or not, this summer is a summer of transition. And you have two choices. You can transition with joy and ease, and you can ride the wave of change, or you can fight against it. And I fought against change for 15 years. I tried to avoid my anxiety. I tried to avoid my depression. I tried to avoid my unhealthy habits. I tried to avoid my self-sabotaging behaviors. And it really just makes life miserable. If you can get on that surfboard and ride the wave of change, change is going to happen. You get to decide whether it's going to be comfortable or uncomfortable. You get to decide whether you're going to get on board or whether you're going to fight it. So it's going to happen anyway. You might as well have fun doing it, and you might as well steer that change so that it actually supports you in the direction that you want to move in, instead of just blow everything up and then the pieces fall into place, right? So that would be kind of my suggestion for you. You're going to notice transition. Some people are moving through it comfortably, which is super awesome. High five to you guys. Some other people are not recognizing that they're needing to change, that they're transitioning, and just all this weird stuff keeps showing up. It's like, it's this unsettled, uncomfortable, kind of a loss, not really sure what to do next kind of energy. So if you're feeling that and you need some help, I want you to know that there are so many resources. Reach out to your friends, reach out to your people, reach out to me, and get that support that you need, because this is the summer that you are going to level up who you are and access that better version of yourself. You're going to do it the easy way or the hard way. So for somebody who's done it the hard way for a really long time, I would suggest don't do it that way. Now, I do want to give you don't need any training, don't need to know anything about anything, super quick tip on how to deal with your anxiety starting right this minute. And I do this all the time. Be honest with you, I would wake up completely overwhelmed and in complete anxiety. I would wake up, be like, oh my God, I have so many things to do, and I have to do this, that, and the other thing, and can I pay my bills? And I've felt this way before, and I found the easiest, quickest, zero training amount of thing that you can do for yourself, especially if you're waking up feeling this way, because then it sets the tone for your whole friggin' day. And then you're like, can't get enough, so you're making fear-based choices, and then you're amplifying the anxiety. So if you wake up feeling anxious, or if you start to feel anxious during the day, this is what I want you to try. Just try this on for size. Do it for like 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. Just try it on and let me know how you make out. I want you, as soon as you start to feel that overwhelm or the anxiety or that stress, I want you to start expressing, whether out loud or in your head, on your feeling level, the things that you're grateful for in your life. And sometimes it's like, I'm grateful when I'm laying in bed. Sometimes it's like, I'm grateful for my really comfortable bed. I'm grateful for my partner. I'm grateful that my daughter's still sleeping so that I can have an extra 5 minutes to myself. I'm grateful that it's sunny out. I'm grateful that it's, we have air conditioning. So I'm grateful that, I have air conditioning. So I want you to start with 10 things that you're grateful for. And if you're still feeling anxious and fear-based, I want you to do another 10. And I basically want you to keep finding things to be grateful for and just itemize them and kind of being like, oh yeah, that's also fun. I'm really grateful for my car. It works really well. I'm really grateful my car has air conditioning. That's awesome. I'm really glad my security sticker went through, so I'm good for another year. Whatever it is that you need to look for or work on. And I want you to just notice how you feel about it and give yourself permission to really go in your heart and feel that gratitude that you have for these things. And the reason why it's such a powerful exercise is that fear and gratitude are such a different vibration that they can't coexist in the same space. So the more you live and express the vibration of gratitude and feel gracious of what you have and appreciate what you have, the harder it is for you to stay in fear. So I want you to try that on for size. I want you to let me know how you make out. And I want you to reach out to me if you feel that you need some support, which I know I've been getting so many calls. A lot of people are taking advantage of the individual sessions that I'm offering. I do have some summer rates in effect. So if you've never tried the theta healing that I use to shift mindsets, to map out neurology, and to create quick, easy, positive change in people's lives, try it on for size. You've got nothing to lose other than your anxiety. You've got nothing other than lose than your stress. And you've got nothing to gain other than an amazing life. So if that speaks to you, I'll pop the link in there. I've gone ahead and already adjusted my rates on my website to reflect the summer promo rate. So you don't have to do anything super complicated. The rates are usually a little bit more, so we've gone ahead and adjusted those for you already. So I want you to let me know how you make out with this exercise, and I want you to go ahead and comment and ask questions. So if something came up and you're like, I get what you're saying, but I don't really quite understand how that applies to me, post in the comments and I'll get back to you and I'll give you some insights as to what might be going on for you specifically. So thanks so much for tuning in. Whether you're listening live or listening to the replay, do post your comments. I do check them, and I will get back to you with comments as soon as possible. So thanks so much for popping in, and I look forward to sharing more of these webcasts with you. Stay tuned. Bye for now.